Welcome back to the super-centex podcast. It's Brice Cherry alongside Chad Conine, DJ Ramirez. Chad, DJ, how are y'all?
Good.
Good. Week 4, I guess, is what we're going into this week. And a few districts.
And if you'd have told me by week 4 we were going to have better weather, I'd have been like, thank you.
I've got a note that'll be running in the high school notebook that basically is just coaches saying hallelujah over the weather. Because, I mean, it's been brutal. It really has.
Well, some friends have pointed out the other day, I went out and hit range balls at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday. And I was talking with some friends after that. You know, it's been really hot when 95 feels great.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Even 98. Yeah, you could tell a noticeable difference between that and 108. So here and in week 4, a few districts have already started district play. District 4, 5A, Division 1, which is Waco High, Lake Belton, Red Oak, that district. And then you have District 7, 3A, Division 1 starting this week with West and Whitney.
That district's already, they started last week. It's just that West was on a bye week.
Right, that's correct. You're right. Yeah. Others will kick off next week. That Crawford, Marlin, Bosqueville district is taking their bye week this week as they get ready for district play. And soon enough, we'll have games that matter in terms of the playoff race every single week. So we've had this discussion in the past, but I want to hear the 2023 answer to this question. What's the toughest district in Central Texas?
Well, I think you have to start, like, the standard bearer in this cycle is the one that had a couple of state champions when it began, the Franklin-Lorena district, which is 11 3A Division 1, Franklin, Academy, Lorena, Troy, Rockdale, McGregor, and Cameron Yo. So, you rattle off the names of several recent state champions in that list, plus an Academy team that has been pretty salty lately.
Well, and so when you started your sentence by saying the district that had a couple of state champions, I thought you were going with District 5, 4A, Division 1, which had China Spring and Stephenville as they were coming off of a state championship when that district started. Obviously, Stephenville did not win state last year, but China Spring did again. And China Spring and Stephenville gave us a classic game to remember. Certainly, Thomas Barr will never forget it. But I mean, I look at that district because you do have China Spring, you have Stephenville 2 years removed from a state title with probably some kids there too, and they're both ranked in the top 10 in the state right now. Alvarado's 3-0 and playing pretty well. And then I think la-vega is better than they were last year. And even Waxahachie Life is not a bad team. So that's a tough 5-team district. Now 4,
no soft spots. Yeah.
4 are going to make the playoffs. So it's only one team getting left out, but man, it's a murderer's row kind of district. DJ, what do you say?
I mean, I think that those are probably the 2 strongest districts right now. The one with Lorena and McGregor, Cameron Yo. I mean, even we saw how McGregor fought back against Gatesville, and I think they're gonna put up a lot of fight. They're gonna have a tough road to get into the playoffs because right now in that district, them and Rockdale are kind of the ones that are gonna be the ones scraping for it. Obviously Lorena really kicked off after that China Spring loss. They've been dominant all throughout this non-conference. And I mean, Cameron Yo might be kind of on the down right now, but they're gonna get it going once district starts, I think. And I mean, Academy's been kind of a surprise. Obviously, I don't know as much about them as y'all do, but they've been on a roll. I mean, they beat Hillsborough, which I didn't think they would, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
picked Hillsborough as well. I mean, they've made a nice transition to a new coach. I mean, obviously they had Chris Lancaster there before. He's now at Robinson, doing a pretty good job at Robinson. This is a different take, but like I think this is not the toughest district, but I think one of the most fun districts for us is 8-2A Division 1, which is that Crawford, Marlin, Bosqueville, Bruceville, Eddy, Riesel, Moody, Valley Mills, and Marlin. You're talking about 8 teams that we cover in Central Texas, and they're on varying levels of success, I would say. I think Crawford and Riesel have probably, kind of ascended to maybe a little bit higher level. But
Valley Mills defied our expectations
Valley
last
Mills, Bruceville Eddy won a game 2 weeks ago that I don't think none of us picked. I mean, I personally think Matt Hurst is going to get it done at Moody. It just may take, another year or so.
Well, there might be time for them because, Crawford and Marlin at the top of that district were pretty tough. Bosqueville is struggling bad right now, and Rosebud Lot seems to have lost that edge that they had as they were kind of climbing in wins every year. They seem to have dropped back a little bit. So that opens the door maybe for Moody and Valley Mills to really get in there and contend.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the Marlin Bulldogs either. I mean, obviously such an incredible season 2 years ago, and then good last year. They were 7-5, 6-1 in district. Obviously, we know how this year started with them having to take that first week off, but they've kind of rebounded nicely. I mean, they got a good win over Groesbeck last week. So we've got 2 really big matchups this week involving top 10 teams in the state rankings that are worthy of a little podcast breakdown, I think. Let's start with the smaller schools. So that would be Class 2A Division 2, number 2 Mart against the 3rd ranked team in 2A Division 1, and that's Centerville. So this is where Chad is going on Friday night. Both are unbeaten. Both are playing great. Who gets their first loss of the season this week?
The Centerville Tigers.
Ooh. You can stick it with the
Mart. For one thing, I just don't want to go out to Mart having said anything like slightly against the notion that Mart is going to kill everybody they ever play. I've learned that lesson already.
You have experienced that before. Well played.
But no, okay, so having said that, I think Centerville's style gives teams a lot of problems. They have several guys they can hand the ball to, and I think they're like a wing T type of offense is what Coach Jacobs told me when they were going into that game. So probably the style of play that can maybe keep the ball away from Mart and frustrate them a little bit. So it'll be interesting. I'll hand it off.
Yeah, well, this was a really close game last year, and Mart only won it by a point. But I don't know. I think it might be a little bit more of a gap this year. I think the Panthers are going to take it just because they've got so many weapons, man. I mean, DeAndre Medlock and JD Bell and Jonah Ross and so many guys. And yes, sure, their O-line is not as experienced as it was last year, but I mean they've kind of pulled off those wins that even you think, oh, maybe this is the one that Mart is not going to get. But Centerville came up with a 1-point win over Teague last week, and Teague is a 3A team. They got it. They kind of held them scoreless for 3 quarters. It was a 1-score game, and it was just that the Lions missed a extra point kick. So I don't know. I think Mart's got it. I think they're a little more solid than Centerville is at this point. So
I think they're both very good. Centerville certainly opened my eyes when they really thumped Crawford pretty well. I mean, So I expect a pretty good game here. Maybe even another 1-point game. That wouldn't surprise me. But I do think it's wise to stick with Mart. They're both battle tested. I think certainly we've seen this over the years with Mart. They sometimes struggle to get teams their size to play them, in non-district play. And so, they've played Crockett this year, which is a 3A team. So, they're going to see some really, really good teams in non-district play. And then when they get up against the likes of, no offense, Dawson and Frost and Hubbard and, whatever.
Well, they got Meridian next week.
Yeah. Ooh, goodness. And Meridian's, good for Meridian for winning last week, but they're not beating Mart. I'm sorry. So
I was just about to say, Mart loves this non-district game because it's a quality opponent, which, it's the best opponent they've seen in non-district and the best team they're probably gonna see
into the playoffs.
Yeah, until deep in the playoffs, until like probably round 3 at least.
And you won't even see Centerville in the playoffs, considering they're in a different 2A division.
D1, yeah.
So yeah, good litmus test, I think, for Mart for sure. So our other top 10 game is an all Central Texas, all McLennan County brouhaha, as the number 3 team in 4A Division 1, China Spring, back-to-back state champions, welcomes in the 7th ranked team in 4A Division 2, Connally Cadets. We've talked about how the Cadets are trying to get where China Spring has already been, considering that the Cougars are coming off back-to-back state champions. So does Connally take another step toward that this week, or does China Spring hold serve? What say you? And DJ, this is the one you're going to.
Don't make me pick this one, please.
You gotta pick it.
I'm gonna have to flip a coin.
Have you made your picks yet?
No.
She said she's gonna have to flip a coin.
Well, I just think that they're 2 very good teams. Obviously, the China Spring got back into the win column against Mejia, and Connolly's just been rolling all season. And even though they had a kind of a back and forth game with Cameron Yo there, at least until the 4th quarter. So, I think it's gonna be close. Kiefer Sibley's just been on another level, and then I think he's going to be hard to contain for a young China Spring defense.
That's fair. That's a good analysis. That's fair.
But then, I don't want to say that China Spring is going to lose this one because, they're China Spring.
They're the standard. Yeah.
They're the standard, and so I just think it's going to be really close.
Should be fun. Yeah, I agree. Chad, you covered this one last year, and I looked up the score. It was like 51-21. It was not close. I feel like it's going to be a lot closer this year. I'm with DJ. It's a lot harder to pick.
Well, that's 72 points. I'll be shocked if we look up Friday night and there's half that many points scored. I think it's going to be a very defensive game. I think China Spring has had a little bit more trouble in the passing game this year than last year. And obviously, Connolly's secondary is a real team strength. And then Kyle Barton hasn't really, kind of found the same kind of running lanes that he found a year ago. So I think that's going to be another big challenge for them. So I think China Spring is going to struggle to score a lot of points on Connally. And I also think that, China Spring's defense against Lorena really came up and popped people and was very physical. Against Melissa, it was a little bit of a different story. I think, and then that had a lot to do with Melissa's personnel on offense. And Connally obviously has really good personnel on offense too. I picked China Spring because it's at their place, and I'm trying not to overthink things these days. And so much like I do And with the 6th man, if I've got 2 teams that are close together, I was like, well, who's at home? Okay, I'll go with them, right? So I just kind of went Connally at China Spring. I'll just go with China Spring because since they're the home team, right? I do have that right? They're at China Spring,
correct? That is, it's at China Spring.
So I just rolled with the home team, trying not to overthink it. But as I speak about it and as I start to talk about it, I'm starting to lean towards Connally, but I don't think my instincts are great on that.
So I have made my picks already, and I did pick China Spring in this one, and some of the reasons that you just mentioned, they are at home. I think that the experience they have in big games comes into play in this one, and even a big game like the one they just had against Melissa a couple of weeks ago. So I think all of that matters, but I like DJ's point about Kiefer Sibley's hard to catch. It doesn't matter who you are. And he's going to be hard to catch for China Springs defense too. So I think it could be a really fun game. Chad, I want to say you covered. Oh, look at her. She's flipping the coin.
She's flipping a coin.
Does it have a cadet on one side and a cougar on the other?
No, I have my Big 12 souvenir coin somewhere. I packed it up, but I can go dig it out and I'll use that.
I was wondering where you were going off the screen there for a second. I like it. We're a very interactive podcast. Chad, you covered this one 2 or 3 seasons ago too, when it really was like a classic game. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Maybe it was
the game where Kavian Gaither basically put the team on his shoulders and directed a comeback in the second half. And games like that, there's guys contributing all over, but it's like the one guy making all the key plays is kind of amazing. And yeah, probably that game stands out a whole lot more than the 51-21 China Spring win at Connally last year does.
Well, and I will say this game, not that it doesn't matter to China Spring, obviously it matters, but I will say if Connally is able to break through and beat China Spring in this game, I think it could do a lot for the.
It really is a tone setter for them.
Yeah,
and when you talk about motivation, I mean, I think as fans, we think about motivation and motivation for our team, but I think maybe as sports writers, one area where our objectivity helps in a lot of cases is that we're able to see the motivation for both teams. And I think China Spring, having been beaten 63-33 on their home field by Melissa 2 weeks ago, is probably a real big motivating factor for them to improve and to not let another team run up that many points on them again.
Yeah.
And turnovers were a huge factor in that game.
Yeah. You mentioned, I did want to make one little point. You mentioned that China Springs passing game maybe not quite as high powered or something as last year. Cash McCollum does lead Central Texas in touchdown passes right now. He's got 11 with no picks. So, yeah.
And you know what? They're not going to like that I said that. And there are guys like Grayson Martin making plays for him. But I think we said on this podcast before, or maybe on the Friday night one, that it's hard to replace a Trey Hafford.
No doubt. He was a stud football player for sure. Anyway, that was just me having typed up a lot of stats in recent days and knowing
That's
some stats.
Debut this week, is that right?
Stats Plus will debut in tomorrow's paper as we record the podcast. It'll be in Thursday's paper. It'll be online later today. So, yeah, and maybe we'll do some breakdown of stat guys next week. I don't know. But right now, I want to get your thought on this. So we've broken down the 2 biggest games of the week, those top 10 games, but we've really got some other intriguing battles on the schedule. This is a better schedule than last week. So outside of those 2 games that we've already talked about, what is the best matchup of the week? Or maybe let me put it like this. What outcome are you personally going to be kind of tracking, keeping your eye on?
Lorena la-vega, I think, is going to be a pretty good game.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2 teams that are really tough. I know la-vega's looking to get back in the win column. after, two really close losses. I wouldn't say close losses, but like just games that they felt they should have won.
Mm-hmm.
And just for whatever reason, they couldn't get that. And then West-Whitney, I mean, it's in that district, it's really just the top 4 or 5 teams. I mean, it's a 9-team district, and it's the top 4 or 5 teams are the ones that are really where the competition is at. And West coming off of a loss to Lorena, then going into a bye week, I know they feel like that was a really important thing for them, that they got to rest and kind of reevaluate and reset where they were at after that, especially with, a pretty young team that's going up against a Whitney team that put up 68 to nothing points over Inspired Vision to Open District last week. And they're a lot more experienced this year than they were last year. Super-centex Defensive Player of the Year and Trey Haynes, but they've also just got guys all over the field. I mean, Jared Anderson and their quarterback, Mason Seeley, they can make plays. They've got some guys that are stepping up that we didn't hear a lot of last year, like Angel Salcedo. And so it's just, I think it's going to be a good matchup, and it's going to be a pretty good test of where these two teams are at this point of the season. So
I like those picks for sure. Chad, what do you say?
Well, I'm going to talk about a team that we don't maybe talk about a lot because they're a little bit out on the fringe of our coverage area. But Lake Belton, I believe, opens district play at Colleen Shoemaker. Is that a district game? Or is that non-district?
They played Red Oak last week in a district game. That was the district opener. So
okay, but
so this
Lake
is
Belton Shoemaker.
This is their second district game. Yeah.
Well, and that one was hard to pick, and I do want to give a shout out to Micah Hudson for removing all the suspense.
I knew we were going to end up talking about Micah Hudson at some point on this podcast.
and he finally made his commitment. I think that's something that maybe he told the Tech coaches about earlier this summer, and finally came out with his graphic and his official commitment and everything. But that was legitimately a hard game to pick. Shoemaker is a up and coming program. Lake Belton is coming off a loss, but they're a really good team. It's one probably that Lake Belton should win, that all three of us pick Lake Belton to win, but it might be a pretty tough out for them playing at Shoemaker at Leo Buckley Stadium. And then the other one that I think is difficult to pick and is going to be, like you mentioned, a litmus test earlier, maybe a real litmus test for both teams here, is Clifton at McGregor. Cam McGregor string together a couple wins in a row, keep bringing a young team along, but also a Clifton team that is kind of on the rise.
McGregor's not really that young. They're just inexperienced because they didn't bring back a lot of starters from last year, but they've got a lot of seniors and juniors on their roster.
So I agree with all of your picks. And I mean, DJ was going to go to West-Whitney really before she was like, oh, yeah, the Connally-China spring game is pretty big.
I also have to get my brake pads replaced, so I don't want to have to drive 40.
Okay, well played. Yeah, that's good.
In the dark.
Be safe. I'm with you, DJ. I think that West-Whitney game, to me, that one was harder to pick than Connally-China spring. Just because of the way Whitney is just hammering people right now. And I agree with you that there is definitely a delineation of power in that district. You have sort of the haves and the have-nots. I mean, some of those Dallas schools, charter schools or whatever they are not on the same level as West and Whitney and Grandview. I mean, let's just face it. And just the way Whitney is playing right now, I mean, it's going to be a really tough game for West. I think West has probably had their number in recent years, but and we'll see, maybe the bye week leading up to this really helps West. I ended up picking the Trojans just as sort of like the big brother, but it would not surprise me in the slightest to see Whitney win. And, Jared Anderson was a guy that you mentioned, DJ. Dude has over 500 receiving yards already through 3 games. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's pretty good stats. Even more than Micah Hudson, who's pretty freaking good. I don't know, Chad, did you watch that Lake Belton Red Oak game? It was awesome.
Thursday night. Thursday night's my my hit the town night. So I was out.
Your beer drinking night.
Yeah, something like that. So and then after I got home, I watched the miserable finish of the Chiefs-Lions game.
Let me tell you, I was flipping back and forth from the Chiefs Lions and the Red Oak Lake Belton game, and the Red Oak Lake Belton game was a lot better.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know what to say about the way the Chiefs started, but it's game one and a lot of weird things happen. Like Aaron Rodgers gets hurt after 5 plays, but the Jets still win the game against the Bills.
It was a weird,
right?
It was a weird NFL week. It was low scoring. It was crazy. But good for Texas Tech, good for Micah Hudson. Obviously, one of the highest rated recruits we've really ever had come through this area, 5-star.
Well, and I believe it's Texas Tech's highest rated commitment ever. So
yeah. And even though like his numbers are very good, but it's not like he's putting up 2,500 receiving yards a season or anything. They're just comparable to a lot of other good receivers. But you watch him and you go, okay, yeah, I see what everybody else sees. And of course, Chad, you and I were at the state track meet watching him blaze up and down the track, and, and also get interviewed more than any other track kid ever.
Having, like I said, I watched the Chiefs game when I got home from dinner on Thursday night and all that. And so I haven't seen Micah Hudson play a lot, but just looking at the size and weight and the speed, you think, and then you have to imagine his dad was a football player at Texas Tech. He was a D lineman at Texas Tech in the late 1980s, and you have to figure that football instincts play a big role in that too, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I do want to mention,
who he's going to be in the same class as Will Hammond, the star of the season so far, statistically at least.
Midway gets to go up against Will Hammond next week. So, so I did want to mention one other game, and that is Waco High and Midlothian. This is another game I'm going to have my eye on. I thought the Lions showed me something by playing Granbury tough in a loss last week to open district play. They're another one like West-Whitney that's in a 9-team district, so they have a quick start. They get 2 non-district games, and then they're boom right into district play. And Zach Smith has been drinking the Waco High Kool-Aid. He's all in on Waco High. I think he was impressed with Lyndon Helt. He said if he was making picks, he'd pick Waco High every week, and I'd say, well, that wouldn't go well. But I do think they're a lot better, and this could be a big one for them against a pretty good Midlothian team. I'll be really interested to see how this one comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they can clean up some of those little mistakes they had in the Granbury game, because I mean, they were driving. They were about to win that game if they didn't have, that turnover toward the end. But I think if they clean it up a little bit, they really got something. I mean, they got a guy defensively, Sean Neal, that's just tearing it up.
Yeah.
And then, on offense, Xavier Amos and Mason Smith are really putting on the yards on the ground. So I think they really got something that eventually they're going to click.
This is a good example of the difference maybe between what's going on inside of a football team and what's going on from our perspective when we're maybe flying sometimes at 30,000 feet and not seeing the smaller picture. Because when a football team lays an egg, for us and the media, when a football team lays an egg like Waco High did against Dallas White, we tend to be dismissive of them, right?
Sure.
And that's probably unfair, but I mean, what else are we going to go on, right? But last year Granbury beat Waco High 45-3, and this year it's a 3-point game. So that's an indicator of progress. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how Zach's theory plays out over the rest of the year. If Waco High can continue to make progress.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I'll be watching that one for sure. So we mentioned it earlier, but DJ will be at the Connally-China spring game. Should be fun on Friday night, and then Chad will be at Mart-Centerville, another top 10 battle. I'm getting 2 high school games this week. How about that? DJ's covering Baylor soccer tomorrow night against Texas. Should be a big match for Baylor soccer, but I'm going to go to that Cove University game, go see the U-Dogs play. That should be fun. And then on Friday night, going to go up to Rockwall and see Midway Rockwall Heath. Midway's last non-district game, yet another 6A playoff team that they're playing against, 4 for 4 in that regard. And they got to fire their schedule maker, I think. But yeah, I thought about asking this question, but to me, it's just a given. Who's got the toughest schedule in Central Texas? It's Midway. I mean, maybe China Spring, maybe Mart, maybe you could, even when you're comparing, the size of the school, but man, Midway's played a pretty tough schedule. So yeah.
Mart has a tough schedule.
Huh?
You're saying maybe Mart has a tough schedule? Maybe this week.
Well, I played Crockett, a 3A team. So yeah, I mean, I think Mart will take on anybody. So anyway, all right, we'll see y'all at the games. Appreciate it.